Research has suggested that even in the earliest phases of infant and toddler development, there are clear associations between exposure to violence and emotional and behavioral problems. Infants and toddlers who witness violence either in their homes or in their community oftentimes show excessive irritability, immature behavior, sleep disturbances, emotional distress, and usually are afraid to be alone.
In a violent environment, you're expecting that these children will take on some of the violent things that they see around them, modeling in that perspective.
The clinical psychologist says parents should look out for extreme violent behavior when children are playing, as this may be a sign of a bigger problem.
Generally, that's how children will express their level of aggression and violence in playing. Not in the same way that adults do. Adults, when they are violent, they just come out and you can see that it's violence. So you look for it in playing. Sometimes too, depression. When you see the child is sad or is too sad for what you expect for normally for children, that could be a symptom of somebody who is experiencing some sort of violence in their life and is becoming depressed because of what they're exposed to.
Mr. Harris points out that with so much violence around us, it's easy for individuals to become desensitized. Hence, the risk of not paying enough attention to the impact on our children increases.
I'm almost certain that the society is way too desensitized and is accepting our environment and what is happening to be normal to some extent, and you can't blame them because these are the images that they see.
Last December, students at the St. Jago High School in Spanish Town cowered in fear as police and gunmen traded bullets on the school's compound. It was an ordeal that lasted for several hours as the students weren't allowed to leave until it was safe. During the days following the incident, the school's guidance counseling team spoke with students and used a questionnaire to gauge initial reactions to what happened.
How has the incident affected you during and afterwards? Feelings of fear, anxiety and depression, bedwetting and sleeping problems, excessive tiredness and fatigue, nightmares, irritability and feelings of being on the edge. Just wanted to have fun and excitement afterwards. You know, some persons feel as if, boy, I could have died and I would not have experienced A or B, I would not have gone wherever. So there was that feeling of wanting to have fun and to enjoy themselves for the Christmas. There was some amount of excessive laughter and fooling around. Persons trivialized it and persons were, you know, boy, how come I never come to school? Can't believe I missed school that day, and so on. But that was just surface reaction. Beneath that, there was that level of fear and that level of anxiety.
The guidance counselor points out that the early assessment helped the counseling team to prepare for what was to come, as oftentimes children do not immediately recognize the long-term psychological impact of experiencing a violent situation.
A number of the cases that I've had since January were persons who were forced back to thinking about persons they had lost to shooting or shooting incidents they had in their communities. And they didn't realize at first that the reason they started thinking about these past experiences was because they themselves had been in this one on December 8th. So in working through it now, then they are able to go closer towards closure and get help if further help is needed.
Research has suggested that an important but little understood area of concern is the issue of invulnerability or resilience. That is, the ability to determine which children will experience fewer negative effects in response to exposure to violence. The most important protective resource to enable a child to cope with exposure to violence is a strong relationship with a competent, caring, positive adult, most often a parent.
It's critical. They need to talk about it. Sometimes you might see that they manifest their emotions in different ways, like aggression or acting out and so on. But it is not only the child's responsibility to find somebody to talk about, it's also the parents and teachers' responsibility to start up the conversation about it. Because initially, you know, they might behave as if it's a big joke, but it's not. It impacts on you over time. You know, to live in an environment when there is aggression or violence, and sometimes people become desensitized to it.
Talking is always good, but getting children to express themselves in different ways can also help them cope with the violence around them. When 16-year-old Andre Chambers was stabbed to death on school grounds last year, several of his schoolmates witnessed the incident and watched as the teenager took his last breath. This left several students traumatized. The school, in helping the students cope with their grief, encouraged them to put their feelings on paper, essentially writing a goodbye letter to their murdered classmate, a critical way to get closure. Another way of helping children cope with violence is to give them a change of environment if at all possible.
Also, it's good to tell them about places where it's somewhat different, exposure, if they could travel. Some areas in Jamaica are less violent than others, so when you have trips, you could take them to nice, serene places and so on. They can see an alternative.
Being able to identify the psychological impact of violence on our children can only be achieved if parents pay attention to their children's behavior and talk with them about the things they hear and see every day. For Live at 7, I'm Keneal Gale.